Have you ever wondered how to make your brand stand out in the midst of pandemic? Empathetic marketing might be the name of the game of 2021. In order to understand this approach more, we have a spectacular guest today with us, Mimi Nicklin. Mimi is a best-selling author, empathy advocate, and strategy consultant that teaches brands to create human-focused and authentic ways to engage their audience. Mimi, welcome to Marketing Reloaded.
Hello, I have a feeling that we're live. I was aware someone was going to do an introduction, but maybe not. I'm not sure. I'm going to give it just a minute and wait and see if the host appears and does an introduction. Otherwise, I will kick off. Okay, I'm not sure what's happened to the introduction, but I will do my own. So everybody that's watching, hello, I'm Mimi Nicklin, and I'm extremely happy to be joining you today at Startups Without Borders. I am a best-selling author and a specialist in empathy. That's my book sitting there behind me. And this is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. This is what gets me up every day. And I do now spend my time talking to the world about empathy, about why we need it, about why we have a deficit of it, and as why leaders and marketers particularly should be using humanity's greatest skill to really improve our work and our effectiveness. So I'm going to talk today about advocacy and loyalty, but fundamentally what I'm talking about is customer experience. Is how do we use our marketing, our communications to really empathize with consumers and therefore make a difference, make an impact to those that we're talking to. So I'm going to just kick off by giving you a little bit of background to what empathy is. So back in 2006, President Obama, before he was president, stood up and addressed an audience, and he said, there's a lot of talk about our federal deficit, but I think we should be talking more about our empathy deficit. So he was leading the world at that time talking about this deficit in empathy. He was referring to this gap between us, this lack of understanding between groups, the loneliness endemic. I mean, I say to everyone, we may currently be in a health pandemic, but we're far deeper into a loneliness endemic. And the data now shows that that loneliness is more dangerous to our mortality than obesity and smoking. But this was something that President Obama was addressing 20 years ago, more or less 15 years ago. And no one's really done anything about it since, which is why I do what I do. And of course, there are others out there as well, talking about how important this is to our businesses and to our world. It's now become a trending conversation. If you had asked me before COVID, who was talking about empathy, I would say I'm not sure anybody is other than me. But now, and particularly after this talk today, you'll see it everywhere. So it's in the news, it's in the business world, it's across the media. You'll see there Coca-Cola launched their 2020 marketing campaign in Europe as an empathy platform. We all know that where Coke goes, others follow. So this really is a conversation going on all around the world. And as I said, that has massively changed in the last 14 or 15 months. When I got my publishing deal, I always remember my mum asking me, that's great that you're publishing a book, but who wants to read about empathy? And she was right. That was November 2019. And it really wasn't, there was no awareness around what empathy is and why we need it back then. Of course, the world has changed monumentally in the last 16 months, not just because of COVID-19, but some of the other social issues going on as well. Whether you look at Black Lives Matter, you look at the work around gender balance. So lots has changed, and this conversation is now leading the way. Why is it important? Because we have a 30-year decline in empathy levels. So we've got 3 decades now of data showing that these levels of empathy between us, our ability to understand each other, is going down. This is a fundamental issue to society, and the implications of this are really far reaching, whether that's the increase in depression, nearly 350 million people with depression, rising anxiety, the rates of burnout, suicide rates. I mean, the second biggest killer of our youth is suicide. Our children are killing themselves rather than choosing to stay on the planet with us. We have massive issues, right? We have massive disconnection issues. Now, of course, these things can't only be mapped to empathy, but our lack of ability to connect as people, our lack of ability to see each other, to hear each other, is a huge part behind, what's going on out there. Now, why is empathy important in the business world? Why is it important for us as marketers? Fundamentally, empathy is your data set. Empathy is about perspective taking. It's about the ability to stand in the shoes or see the world from the eyes of another and be able to understand their context. Why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they saying what they're saying? Why are they feeling like that? Why do they come to that decision? Why are they behaving like this in this meeting today? It provides you with data. And all the data out there, this is not just me, shows that organizations that have empathy in their culture, that have emotionally intelligent organizations, see higher levels of all kinds of indicators: higher performance, higher output, higher loyalty, higher motivation, higher profit per capita, and then lower things like absenteeism, lower staff turnover. So this is literally one of the most sort of key defining data pieces within our businesses and of course within our marketing today. It is your data set to be able to make sort of more accurate human decisions. Now, what's great about empathy is that it is a skill set. This is something you all have. Probably my biggest question that I get is, are we born with more or less empathy? Mimi, do you have more empathy than me? Does my husband have less than I do? All of these questions, the answer is no. You're all born with exactly the same amount of empathy. It's a fixed amount, and it's a competence that we can master and practice. It's a skill set. And like any skill set, the more you practice, the better you get, the more cohesive it becomes. Fundamentally, empathy is a choice. You choose to use that skill or you choose not to. That's what it really comes down to. So when it comes to imbuing empathy into our workplace, this is a decision that all leadership teams have. And there is a great, as I've mentioned, return on investment of doing exactly that. So there is an ROI to empathy, and I'm going to touch on it really briefly today. But what we do know is that our emotional system is inextricably linked to our cognitive function. So what that means is that when our emotions are looked after, when we feel well, and fundamentally in this space, when we feel seen and heard, which is the very bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is fundamental to human survival. Literally, modern civilization was born from this. As human beings, we need to be seen and to be heard. That is what defines us as a species. And when we're feeling like we are seen and heard, we're surrounded by people, leaders, teams that hear us, and in the case of marketing, campaigns that are actually relevant to what I'm doing, to what I want to buy, to the brands I want to look at, we see cognitive function go up. We see decision making change. As I said, there's a whole list of ROI in this space, and I've touched on some of them, but fundamentally, if we put it into a very little cup, it builds relationships for obvious reasons. We're talking about better connectivity, better relationships, better understanding, higher trust, higher loyalty. When you're talking about advocacy, a higher, more ripe ground to build advocacy from, because there is mutual understanding. It drives work, marketing that works. because the work is based on insight, is based on humanity, is based on a real need. If you understand your consumer and your customer, then of course you can create work for them that works better. And again, there's many, many pieces of data out there and that I present on around the, the ROI and the connection between creativity and empathy. When we see empathy go up, we see the effectiveness of the communications go up. And if you look at the IPA data, for example, out there today around the effectiveness of marketing campaigns in the last 15 years, you'll see that we have a real problem with our effectiveness. Empathy can help fill that gap. Love this. It brings us joy. As an evolutionary species, we're very clever. Because we knew that we needed to empathize in order to be able to sustain society, our brains developed in such a way that when we empathize with others, we also see the joy neurons or the joy neural pathways in our brain light up. So when you empathize with others, with your customers, with your team, it actually makes you happy. So if you didn't need any more reason, it's going to cheer you up. And everyone needs a bit of cheering up right now. And as I said earlier, it makes us money. All of these indicators, performance indicators, go up. This is not just about doing the right thing for people. This is not just about making, more effective marketing. This is about actually driving the bottom line of our businesses. You've probably noticed this. I guess it's pretty obvious, but the marketers that are changing the world understand the world. They're able to create work. And I'm not just talking about the Coca-Colas and the Amazons and their multi-million-dollar marketing pieces, but the marketers that really understand their audiences, that understand how their product fits in, especially as times are changing in post-COVID world or still during COVID world. Those that really understand what's going on out there are the ones that are able to make marketing that really pushes into the space of advocacy, of loyalty, communications that you actually want to watch again, communications or marketing or programs that make you want to be loyal to those brands because they're tapping into something that is actually powerful and authentic. And as I said earlier, empathy really is a powerful path to deeply resonant and behavior changing stories. Because if you don't understand each other, if we don't understand our customer, I mean, it's kind of obvious, right? How are we ever going to create marketing that really talks to them? And even though it's pretty obvious, and even though for all of us on the call today, you know this, you've studied this, you've been doing it for your whole careers, how often do we actually do it? How often do we go beyond what the data is saying to really understand the humans behind that data? How often now do you hold a focus group? I mean, COVID aside, how often do you really listen to those around you? It has become so much of the CMO's role to look after procurement and analysis and financial balance that we are spending probably 30% of the time that we once did actually understanding our customers and creating work for them and not work that feeds the organization and the stakeholder management and the politics of what they're hoping to see. Empathy changes our ability to tell stories and the impact that they have on customers. So I want to play this for you. This is a really old ad, and the quality is a bit fuzzy because it's about 20 years old now. I hope that the sound plays well for you, and have a little look, and we'll talk about it afterwards.
Many of you feel bad for this lamp. That is because you're crazy. It has no feelings, and the new one is much better.
So that was an incredibly famous piece of work for IKEA many years ago. But how many of you felt sorry for the lamp? I would say all of you. It's very hard to watch that ad and not feel sad for that poor lamp that's been thrown out of the house and is looking back with all of the sadness. That is empathy. Your ability to have just watched an ad from the point of view of an inanimate lamp and actually feel emotions for it is empathy. So I wanted to show it because it's a great example of how powerful our empathy is. You can empathize with nearly anything if you set your heart to it. This is a really important slide because the reality is, us humans, we don't have an issue with what we put our attention on. We have an issue with where we place it. So we spend so much time talking about, well, consumers today, they only have the attention span of a goldfish and they only want to watch for 6 seconds or 10 seconds or 30 seconds at the most. It's just not true. When we engage human beings, we spend time watching things. I mean, have a look at the lines. If you think in the pre-COVID world, when some of those big sort of movies would come out of the cinemas, the ones for teenagers with all the superheroes in and stuff, some of those movies are 3.5 hours long. And the youngest of us, the teenagers who we all say, are only addicted to TikTok and can't possibly watch anything for more than, 25 seconds, will not only queue to go in, but then sit there for 3.5 hours, totally transfixed to the screen. We don't have an issue with our attention span. That is not a problem. We have an issue with what we put that attention on. And I believe that if we can increase our empathy with those consumers, we can drive that advocacy and loyalty that we're looking for. We can keep them engaged. We can talk to them in a way that is really interesting. And, we're doing more and more fantastic work with mass personalization, with CRM systems, with our ability to hold these conversations that hold that attention. But the way we do that is so totally critical. Do you really want a happy birthday message from your car insurance? Be honest, do you? Unless it's with a voucher with some money off for your next year's insurance, I doubt it. So we're getting into this habit of, yes, we're increasing personalization, but we're also creating bulk out there. We're not, as I say, using our empathy to really understand what it is that you would like to hear from your car insurance company. And as I said earlier, empathy becomes your data set. Do you really understand what your consumers are looking for? And how do you create work that does that better? Now, underlying all of this is one fundamental belief, in my point of view, and it's this: that we are more alike than we are different. And I believe that if we can drive this into the world through our marketing, through our stories, through our product development, through the power that you have as startups, as marketers, as opinion leaders, let's try and remind ourselves of this, that we're all just human beings. Take away context, background, religion, language, all of these things, and we're all far more alike than we are different. I've spent the last 14 years traveling the world, studying culture across probably now 25 markets, living in most of them. And I can actually assure you that this is true. Even if you don't share a language, we all share this common need, as I said earlier, to be seen and to be heard. And I love this quote by Stuart Butterfield from Slack, who says, "It's very difficult to design something for anyone, for someone, for anyone, if you have no empathy." How are you creating your innovations in your startup business? How are you perfecting your app? How are you working out what to put on the home screen? How are you deciding on your UX if you don't truly have empathy for those that are going to be using the product that you're developing? Now, these are values that really matter. Empathy matters. And a society without those values is devoid of humanity. And a society without humanity is, let's be honest, quite a scary reality. And as I said at the beginning, based on the data we're seeing, 30 years of declining levels, all of these issues around suicide, stress, strain, wellness, mental issues in the workplace, we are taking antidepressants to go to work. When did we normalize that? I would say that the scary reality is closer to us than perhaps we think, and that all of you have the power to be part of changing that, to bringing more empathy into our world, and to bringing that humanity back to the workplace, to the marketplace, and of course, to our society. I want to end with this really beautiful quote from Virginia Woolf, who was a British author. And she said, "Though we see the same world, we see it through different eyes." All of you today have sat and watched me. You've seen the same background, the same green top, you've seen the same slides. But how you saw me, how you took away this message, how you felt, the things that you're going to remember are going to be entirely different for every single one of you. And again, if we just remember this, that everyone around us sees things slightly differently, that it's about their perspective and not ours, we may find that we're building more bridges than perhaps we're knocking down. I would love to continue the conversation. I'm incredibly active on Instagram and LinkedIn at Mimi Nicklin. I have a breakfast show podcast called Empathy for Breakfast. It's across all podcasts platforms. It's just been voted number 5 in the UAE, which I'm super proud of, where I'm taking this discussion around the world. I would love to hear from you. And my book is there on the right, which is available in all good bookstores and across Amazon everywhere, and tells the story of me turning around a business with empathy, leading to that, and has a lot of content in there around marketing and how we bring it into there and how we bring it into leadership. So please do stay in touch. Please do let me know if you'd like any of the data I spoke about today or would like to hear a little bit more. I spend lots of time talking to people about this. And as I said, this is my passion. So I will happily share with anyone who's interested. I believe there is time now for some questions, but because we are perhaps hostless, I will just see if there is a system here for questions and have a look. No, I don't think so. Or perhaps you guys are seeing and hearing something that I'm not, but that is the beauty of modern technology today. So as I said, please do connect with me. I'll happily answer any questions. Oh, here's one that just popped up here. There we go. The question was, do you think that empathy is valued as a competence or more seen as an emotion and somehow given less value? I think it's a brilliant question. I think it's changing, as I said at the beginning. That opinion, that understanding is changing really quickly. But I think lots of people do think of it as an emotion. Lots of people ask me questions like, what's the difference between empathy and compassion? What's the difference between empathy and sympathy? They're, of course, entirely different things. Empathy is a skill set. Compassion is an action, actually. Sympathy is an emotion. So, yes, I think there is a lot of confusion out there, which is why I so passionately get up every day and do this and just talk to people about what that is, and trying to use as much data as possible to change those opinions as well. Can it be trained? Yes, I'm doing it. Others are doing it as well. There are ways to train this into your teams and see huge difference from that. So it definitely is a competence. It can be trained. It can be improved. And I think really the more of us that talk about it and share that awareness, the better that will be. So yes, I hope that answers the question. Again, do connect with me if you want to hear a little bit more. And as I said, I've got loads of data I'm happy to share on, or it's in the book as well, if you'd like to have a look. Any other questions? Anything at all before I sign off and we all head closer to the weekend? I don't think so. Thank you so much for joining me here and for being here with me today. And as I said, here's to a little more empathy, a little more often. Bye-bye.